Welcome to Mo Stop Mo Podcast. Mo Stop Mo is a community for anyone who loves the first form of animation ever put to film. For our very first episode, we're going to geek out with Mo Stop Mo founder David Rocco Facchini and other team leaders, talk about the studio, our upcoming festival, events, and our first 2020 stop-motion film production, The Cookie Cutter. Here we go.
Hello everyone, welcome to our first episode of Mo Stop Mo Podcast.
Yay!
Thank you. I am your host, Fu Yan. I am the production lead at Mo Stop Mo. For the very beginning, I am doing the animation and some fabrication for our production. I would call myself more like a production follower because our team and the stop motion community just do so many amazing things. I am very willing to share with you during this podcast.
Hi guys, my name is Nia and I'm an animator and fabricator for Mo Stop Mo, and I'm glad to be here today.
I'm Zaldy Dingle. I'm a lead animator and lead fabricator at Mo Stop Mo. I also do compositing, layout, a little bit of everything. Jack of all trades.
Hi everybody, my name is David Rocco Facchini. I am the director, executive producer of Mo Stop Mo and our short that we are creating, The Cookie Cutter. And I am also a director and producer for stage and screen and beyond. So right now we are in FM Oakland Gallery, which is kind of, if you're an Oakland resident or frequenter, we're right at Telegraph and 25th. And this is where we are recording the last leg of our stop motion short, The Cookie Cutter, which will be premiering at the Mo Stop Mo Film Fest on April 4th, 2020. It's been quite an adventure from the beginning of this to where we are now. There's been a lot of transitions, and I think the most interesting thing, outside of the great animation and fabrication that we've experienced and the community and bonds we've formed over the last year of making this film, is how to stick with a film no matter what's thrown at you. So that's where we are mentally and physically in my position. So I don't know what you guys feel about this. I'd actually be interested in hearing your opinions because this kind of thing I've experienced before. I'm not sure if you guys have with the film.
I think this is my first experience with a situation like this. I mean, we've moved the studio once already, and we were based out of San Francisco initially, but through circumstances that we ended up here. But it's been trying, it's been frustrating at times, but we're here. We're finally animating again, so that really releases a lot of the pressure, I think.
Yeah.
I guess I like it here better in our new studio because it feels more independent, so I become more protective of the space, and we get to build the actual space from scratch. And we have Zaldy building the animation table and David building
The whole shooting booth.
Yeah. So I feel very protective about this space.
Yeah, I would like to mention more about like the FM space because before this studio was David's own studio, like we were doing different type of sculpting artworks. And yeah, how do you feel like the studio now is becoming a more multi-purpose?
Well, for this studio to become more multi-purpose for me is great. Mm-hmm. I love it because I do many different things. Like if I'm doing props for sets or if I'm doing sculpture, I do found object sculpture. And that's how I originally got the studio. And just to give people an idea of the size of this studio, it's basically about a 14 by 10 foot footprint. And we've built upward enough to house a stop motion set and a lot of my found objects, which is a lot. And it was a bit of a challenge to make it fit our studio once we had to leave San Francisco back in November. It took some time. Right now we're in January, and it set us back a little bit, but I'm actually excited about it. I think the energy that the rest of the team brings, it like motivates me to get here more and do more here. I just like that also that FM has been very accommodating for us. So FM Gallery hosts many different artists of different disciplines, and it's a great location. Emily and Joe are awesome at managing the gallery space, and it's nice to have that energy as well. So overall, I'm pretty happy with it. And just to kind of speak about the space, one more thing is like I'm pretty resourceful about making small spaces work. In Chicago, I had a small space. Even where I live now, I live in a tiny home, so I'm trying to make the most work with the littlest amount of real estate possible. So I guess that being said, though, you guys, it might be a little bit of a challenge. Like, we're right now squeezed into our little studio space, which is less than a 10 by 14 footprint because we have an exterior and an interior. So 3 people animating these final scenes of our film. I'd like to know about your experience about working a small space.
I think that's the hardest part, is animating in a small space. Our last studio space, we had a bit more freedom to move. But I think what's really different about this space, I mean, other than the footprint, is the environment. I think our last studio space was pretty much in an office building in a closet. We had a lot of room in that closet, but it was very cold and very impersonal, and you felt very separated from everybody else. But here you're surrounded by a lot of other artists of multi-disciplines, so you could step out of the shooting booth and just browse around other artists' work and gain some inspiration that way. So I think that part's really neat. But the physical act of shooting it's tight. I think fortunately, we've been able to do a lot of our shooting with an animator and an assistant. And we usually flip roles as who's animating and who's assisting. So the act of actually, posing the character and taking the shot, you don't have to physically strain yourself. Like, as an example, posing one of our characters and then having to sort of do this yoga tai chi pose to sort of get yourself to the computer to take your shot, only to do the reverse tai chi yoga thing to get back to the position where you have to pose a character.
I would actually love to see the different poses you have to do to sneak under the stage and reach for the remote, capture a frame, look at the screen, and then kind of go back to that position 1 so you can kind of move the rig to reposition the puppet.
It would actually make for great reference for another animated short.
Yeah.
I mean, the poses that you have to get into to sort of avoid bumping the camera and avoid bumping the stage. And as
you're feeling muscles you haven't felt in a while.
Oh, yeah. Like, and also having to squat down before you have to physically take a shot of a current pose, and doing that for 2 to 3 hours. Yeah, you get your workout in.
Yeah. Well, like Nia was even saying, like, she had a little bit of a sore back this morning because of the shoot. So, but she's here like a trooper, so that's awesome.
Yeah, Yep.
I did 3 hours of squats. My legs are still feeling it.
Yeah, your wife's like, oh, you should animate more.
I do agree what you guys say, like this whole environment, that we feel more connected to the art part of things, because while we are creating things, when we step outside the booth, we just see other artists are doing their stuff. And they are also pretty related to what we are doing, actually, because for stop motion, we need to do so many fabricating things. So there are some artists doing like sculpting artwork, or some,
like, there's casting, there's a bronze casting and sculptor across the way, ceramicists. There's a lot of similar disciplined. I mean, stop motion is every art form that ever existed in its field. So you could say, oh, there's a painter, well, that's stop motion. Oh, there's an illustrator, well, that's stop motion. It's like, yeah, but it's true that more specific to the sculpting part, there's a lot of that here.
Yeah, I feel like we do what the the ceramicist across the way does, a lot of character sculptures, and I feel like we do the exact same thing, except we do it 24 to 50 to 15 to 24 times a second,
right.
or for a second of animation. So it's all related, and so we could relate to every artist that's in this building.
Nice. This spring, we are going to have a big event. That is our first year of Mo Stop Motion Shorts Festival. David, would you like to introduce it?
I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, but with the premiere of our short, The Cookie Cutter, I decided that I wanted to build even more community around our fest, and that's the mission of Mo Stop Mo. So I was like, let's create the Mo Stop Mo Shorts Fest. So it's basically focused on emerging stop-motion filmmakers to get in the same space and meet like-minded people and possibly interact with people of the trade who can act as mentors. Generally, it's a fun thing, but it's also a networking thing. And I've been doing storytelling in all different forms for many years. And the one thing that I always find that a lot of artists have shared with me as well is that they're good at being artists, but they're not good at being business people. So these type of events are pretty important because I have gone from being an artist to also adding producer to my title, because introducing people and talking about their strengths is what I really like seeing. And when you get people together who are creative, they start creating something new that you couldn't have even imagined. So this festival, which is going to be on April 4th of 2020, that's going to be our screening date. It's going to be that whole weekend of the 4th. But that's the mission, is to grow the community around basically the oldest and very first form of animation ever put to film. And I'm excited to premiere this film, and with my team who's handling the nitty-gritty of getting the film done while we're managing a festival, we all have we all have a lot on our shoulders, but I think it's a positive challenge. What do you guys think?
I think it's a positive challenge. I mean, as an animator and fabricator, it's a majority of my experience has been animating and fabricating. So having sort of firsthand, and also in terms of festivals, I mean, my only experience with festivals is entering them, not necessarily setting them up. So looking at it from the other side on how it's set up, the type of things that need to be thought about, things that as an artist you really have no concept until it's thrown at you. I think that's what I'm looking forward to the most with this film festival. Not necessarily the film festival itself, because I've been in and have experienced film festivals, so I know what that part's like. But the setting up of it, especially seeing it from behind the curtains and everything that goes into putting a festival together, I'm curious about that and looking forward to learning more about it.
I think this is what I like about our group, because it's so small and we've been through so many obstacles together. It feels like we have nothing to lose and we're ready to take on anything that we didn't know we could do. Like, this festival is the first festival that me and not David, maybe David has more experience in it, but it's new to me, and I feel like since we're already doing this, we are forced to do what we didn't know we could and try to make it happen with all that we have.
And I think the hardest part about getting started as an animator, or especially in an art form like stop motion animation, is getting exposure. Actually, with any animation, it's getting exposure. So you could either enter your film in other film festivals and cross your fingers, which, you know, it's also another option out there. But to start your own is pretty ambitious and pretty audacious, actually, but sometimes you have to either go big or go home. So yeah, what do you got to lose?
Except a lot of money.
Right. But that's...
Yeah, I'm very excited about this festival. Once I heard David was sharing he has this goal for Mostamo to have this festival and build a bigger community. I'm very happy with that. And since I've also experienced different festivals and meetings and attend those festivals, I know what is very important for the filmmakers to feel fully appreciated, and also the networking is important, like the communication. So I am very looking forward that Mostamo Festival can let everyone feel welcome. And we are want it to be educational, so everyone can just get a lot of gift and learning and experience during this event.
I think what would be neat, actually, is if one day you could write a book on, like, maybe even a small book on how to put on your own film festival. Because I think that would actually be a pretty intriguing read, because there's a lot of things that I think most animators and film producers just don't appreciate on the back end with regards to film festivals.
You know, it's funny. So when I was in Chicago, I worked for a place called Second City, which is basically the comedy birthplace of comedians from A.D. Bryant and Tina Fey, John Belushi, Chris Farley, Steve Carell, Stephen Colbert. Basically, all these people went through Second City, and when I was there, I was one of the founding members of starting a 7-day film festival based off of an improv suggestion. At the same time, I was also working at another place called the Chicago International Music and Movie Festival, and that was all about music-driven films. So I've been a part of the festival environment, not only managing but participating. For a music and movie festival, I was their award designer, but then I would plan like award ceremonies. Being in that environment helped me realize what is successful and what isn't, and what I'm trying to do, and also kind of listening to you guys about submitting your films over the past year, what your experiences have been, how to make this on the animator's end to be the most rewarding experience. Like, as an example, any animator who applies to this automatically gets a ticket. even if they don't get into the fest. I don't think you could find that too many places. If you get rejected from a fest, there goes the money. It's like, no, well, if you could get to Oakland, there's a seat waiting for you, and there's an opportunity to meet all these other people.
Awesome.
And also, even if you submit and you don't get into the run of show for our screening, we're going to link your film or your information on our website. So the community goes even past the event. It is like online. So if people wanted to check out the people who submitted and they showed and they're like, oh, I'm not in the fest, but here's my name and here's my link. Because the whole thing is making this a community and making it something that people are going to feel positive about. I don't know if you guys have submitted to fest and then you haven't gotten in. I have in the past with my film, and I finished my film many years ago. And it kind of takes the legs out of you. It makes you question how much time you put into, especially a stop motion film. Like, man, I put all this effort and they don't want it. It makes you just feel like you failed. And I think, like, I don't want to be like, oh, everyone gets a trophy, because that's not necessarily the case. But if you have ambition and you're willing to keep on working towards it, and you just say, okay, this didn't work out for you, but we would still like you to be a part of our community, I think that might encourage somebody who might have otherwise been defeated kind of go into this industry. Because anyone who wants to attempt a stop motion film and finishes it versus just attempting it and quitting is already, like, for me, very impressive. To start a film, anyone could start a film. To finish a film, as we've experienced, there's obstacles that come your way from everyone, from big, powerful people to insignificant mosquitoes. But you have to just keep on going forward. So this festival, in general, for me, is like, we recognize all the effort that you guys put into making your film, and let's just celebrate that you finished.
Yeah, we are happy, always happy to see you are successful.
Yeah.
Now we're during the process of inviting more professionals from the industry to be our juries. I'm curious that when you're watching a stop motion film, what are you looking for, or what kind of film would impress you? For example, I think the performance from the characters really affect how much I get involved in the story. The timing and motion matter. I can still enjoy watching a stop motion film with a simple or raw fabrication as long as the animation feels right. However, it is a pity if I see a brilliant fabrication, but the puppets just keep wobbling, not moving in arc, or not following other animation principles. I'll easily get distracted by that.
So, yeah, story is important to me, but if I see they have a nice camera shot and nice acting, I will be very, very impressed and just give them a thumb up. How about you guys?
Well, when I watch a stop motion film, one of the things that impresses me are the films that are able to, or the animation that are able to capture subtle movements. Because capturing subtle movements is easy enough to do in 2D animation or in CG animation, because you could go back and you could, tweak a frame here and there. Like in 2D animation, you can resketch a frame. In CG animation, you can repose a pose, and you could go back and forth and second guess and re-guess and third guess and fourth guess and play back immediately, and you have yourself this really nice subtle move, especially with a lot of acting scenes, really like subtle facial movements or eye blinks or all the things that make a character emote. But in stop motion, to accomplish that in stop motion is challenging, because it's, even with all the preparation that you do, it's still straight ahead animation. I mean, you can in some cases do like sort of pose to pose and in between, but it's really hard to do. So that's one of the things that really impresses me with a lot of the stop motion animations that I watch, is the ones that are able to do it, and able to do it with the least amount of digital assist.
Well, it's funny. I was just talking to you earlier about, I got an opportunity while I was a student at Columbia in Chicago to meet Ray Harryhausen. And this was before the advent or an incorporation of a lot of digital technology for the most part. And I posed a question to him. I was like, what do you feel about digital technology and stop motion? And he said, I don't understand why people refer back. I always like moving forward. And it's interesting to, like, I think the more you observe with films and you look at some of his amazing stuff and you realize he didn't go back and didn't have a digital assist. He had surface gauges, and there was probably some sort of animation in which they lined things up. But that he was able to pull off what he did, that kind of animation for me sets the tone. So when I look at anything stop motion, I feel like it's just like anything else. You look at it in two ways. You look at it with your head or you look at it with your heart. And when you're watching a film with your heart, that means it's got you. But when you see something that looks a little weird or looks a little off, or that arc doesn't work, the path of motion isn't right, the timing isn't right, and then you start thinking about it as you're in your head, especially as a stop motion filmmaker, you're like, oh, how did they do that, or where did they go wrong? I think like when I see a good film, I'm watching it basically with my heart, and that's as an analytical person, that's a hard thing to do and harder to see on the screen. So what I'll say even about all of these guys who are with me at Mo Stop Mo, their films are amazing, and they've been winning in festivals, and they're being screened in many different places. The animation is there. You see it, you feel it, and you watch it with your heart rather than your head. Like Nia has Goodnight, Mr. Sandman, and that character who's basically has writer's block, the simple emotion and this flat look to somebody I can relate to. Or with Fu and Telltale, where this character who's very untraditional really represents like the trial of life, in my opinion. And then Zaldy, who does really wonderful character animation and kind of more traditional style of animation, has such dynamic movement. Everything can ring true if you're watching it with your heart. And when I watched all of your films, I'm like, wow, these are great stop motion filmmakers. So my long answer to that is I like to watch a film that I could watch with my heart.
Since I make my stop motion film, I realize how difficult it is to actually transmit the feeling that I want to give in my character. So what I'm looking for in a stop motion film is usually the really, really subtle action from the characters. And it's when you're animating, you know how hard it is to just keep things still, because you take one frame and then you feel like you have to move something to take another frame. Like, say, for example, this movie, a stop motion film, My Life as a Zucchini. Actually, the story is not really otherworldly, like, because usually when you do animation, a lot of people say that, why do you have to do it in animation if you can do it in live action? But My Life as a Zucchini is really a proof that it really gives you another level of feeling and emotions when you watch it, because of the most subtle actions that they give between each characters.
Yeah, and that's also another thing that I look for is, why are you doing it? Like, why is it stop motion? It's like, and there's, movies that you run into that are done in stop motion, and you ask yourself, but why? But that's one of the things that I also look for. Like Anomalisa is a great example. Yeah, that could have been done live action. But I think because they did it in stop motion in general has a weird, creepy feel to it anyway. Yeah. And the story of Anomalisa is sort of in a weird, creepy story.
Well, it's like the everyday horror,
Yeah.
The horror of going numb, but like in such a traditional setting, which they pulled off beautifully, Yeah,
but do it in stop motion and to give it sort of that overlying creepy vibe. I think if you did that in live action, it would have lost something. Well,
it was a play first, and that's one thing I'll say is that there is like a vibe that you get from theater that is so alive. And even though stop motion isn't alive, that it becomes so alive, but still kind of has that undertone.
It's tangible.
Yeah, it's almost like the perfect format for like basically adapting that play to a film.
We've already received some submissions. Thank you all, and please just spread the word. We're looking forward to seeing more wonderful works from you. And I want to go back to our production. The film title is called The Cookie Cutter. I'd like you guys to share what the story is about.
Well, Nia did such a beautiful poster for this.
Yes.
So I feel like I'm going to try and just not talk as much this time. But I would like to know what you guys think it's about.
The story, I might leave to Zaldy. Maybe he has a very cool answer about it. But I really want to talk about especially the fabrication. We have so many talented artists to do it. And for example, Zaldy is one of our lead fabricator. And there are some things he's like mixed with handmade, but also mixed with a 3D printer. A lot of props he's making is actually functional. Yes, you can really play with it. I don't know, can I say it or not? Like that prop.
Oh, of course. I mean, it was such a secondary prop to the shoot, but Zaldy created a fishing rod.
Yes.
Oh,
That's what you're talking about, right?
Yes, yes.
And it was just like, oh, it would be nice to have a fishing rod in the corner. And Zaldy goes home and he creates a miniature functioning fishing rod.
Yes.
That was fun to make, and that was mixed media. I mean, it was a wooden dowel, some copper wire. Let's see, what else did I use? Tape.
Did you print
paper?
anything?
The only thing printed was the actual reel.
Yeah.
The actual reel was just a simple printout off of my 3D printer, and that was only because I was sort of
like a shape to that, right?
There was a shape to it, and it would have been something really, really difficult to do with clay or epoxy. It's because that's not really my forte. But yeah, that's what I did. It's fun to do. It was a little over the top, but it was fun.
Yeah.
We might want to share all these productions, like the set and the props, kind of being our art gallery show, right?
Yeah. Kind of deviating from the question, like we are having a gallery show during the fest called The Art of Mo Stop Mo, where it is going to feature some of the stuff that everyone's worked on. And even though there's only 4 of us here, there's many people on the production team, from people who are creating the sound design to music to props and sets, other animators, so designers.
All respect.
Yeah, that'll all be during the fest as well. And it's also going to be running for the entire months of April and May of 2020.
Yeah, we'll share more detail or info later on.
Mm-hmm.
So just keep following up our social media, and we will have our second podcast. You'll know more info about it. And just a little tiny things is that a lot of drawing in this film is created by Nia. Like David has mentioned about the poster and also our cookie box, Nia's style of the drawing really fits to the feel what we want for the Girl Scout or the film itself. So very willing to share later.
Right.
How about you?
Yeah. I mean, just going back to the original question, before we go any further on the production aspect, the story of the cookie cutter is basically not affiliated with the actual Girl Scouts, but a generic term, Girl Scout, is trying to sell cookies.
I like to say cookie scout.
Yeah, a cookie scout. Oh, there we go. That's great.
And it's all about wording, right?
Right. We don't want to get into any trouble there. So a cookie scout is trying to sell her cookies to an individual who has a
addiction
or predisposition to eating a lot of cookies, but all the while he's trying to resist the cookies in order to get in shape. And all of that is conveyed in hopefully a 3-minute, maybe slightly longer than 3-minute stop motion short.
Yeah. What did you guys think of the story when it first came about, when they pitched us the story? Very first impression, if you could remember, because I've shown it since, and I sometimes forget my first impression until I see it through other people's eyes.
I think when it first started, I wasn't in the team yet. I wasn't really interested in it, to be honest, but I'm more interested in the fabrication part. But as we go along with the production, and David is the kind of person who overanalyzes things, and apparently this story is actually speaking a lot about people today, like how we are always, what's that?
Body dysmorphia?
About body dysmorphia. Obsessed with it.
Yeah.
So I think it's growing on me, and I like it, and I'm becoming supportive of the story. Yeah.
I think initially when I saw these storyboards, it was a little shocking because in the original draft of the storyboard that were a little unsavory, but we have, I think going forward, when moving forward with the film, we've made quite a few tweaks to it that serve the story well, and that sort of lightens what was originally a really dark story to give it more of a lighter friendlier feel.
Right.
Yeah. First, I saw the animatic. I would see, oh, it's dark. I like it. And yeah, I definitely need to join in this project. And I want to do some of the fabrication which link to the dark side, even though I never made it before, but I want to. So yeah, that's the first motivation. Like, okay, I need to join in the project. I like the story. And later on, David, as our director, he started to try to give more depth of the story, give more analyze of the character. So there's more explanation, and oh, it's deep. And yes, I kind of more related to the characters and knowing what they are like suffering from and what they are worried about. It's realistic to me. It just told by different kind of creatures and a different kind of environment, but it happened in our life. So I think it's very worthy to share.
Yeah. I think in a way the original draft of the storyboard was more akin to, let's say, an old Tex Avery Warner Brothers cartoon where it was just you're here, you're there, some stuff happens, and then you're gone. But I think the current form of the story and what we've ended up with and what we're currently animating is more akin to it's really short form storytelling. It's not a gag reel. It's short form storytelling, and I think that's the best part about it.
Yeah, you know, what I wanted to say in general about the story without really talking about the story at all is sometimes you're given a story as an animator and you can definitely provide feedback, but at the end of the day, if your producers tell you this is what the story is going to be, you can do the best you can with the story you have. And we could probably look at a lot of stop motion films and say, wow, I love the animation, but the story, So when I first saw this, I was like, well, this is the story we have, and the people who gave us this story, the original producers of this film, didn't give us an option of another story, which was like, okay, let's just do this. And like you were saying, you were interested early on in doing some of the fabrications for some of the darker parts of the story, which are still being used. But that's not what we wanted for the film. The idea of the film is like, I'm really proud of everyone's done with this. And I think everyone who gave us the story was like shocked at how much we've done with it versus the original vision. So I think this being like, as Most Stop-Mo also acts as a little bit of an educational process that runs alongside of a formal educational process to explain the pipeline of producing films and stop-motion films specifically, that how do we make lemonade with this? So tweaking the story or making the characters act a certain way, kind of referencing some of those older cartoons. I was making a reference the other day of some of the Chuck Jones type of animation where your protagonist has to have a little bit of an attitude and your victim, quote unquote, has to be a little bit of a blank slate, but it harkens back to storytelling that we've seen 100 times over, like Laurel and Hardy or the Three Stooges or Bugs Bunny, the Roadrunner and Coyote, where it's just kind of like there's this one person who's got an agenda and might have a little bit of mean-spiritedness to them, and this other person is just trying to exist or trying to get around this person who's trying to get something from them. And that dynamic, finding that heart of the story, no matter what story you're giving to, can make any story that could have gone, in my opinion, a bad way, go in a good way.
Yeah.
So that's all I'll say about our story for now.
Okay, so we mentioned about the premiere, and we also a little bit mentioned about our art gallery show, which will be during April and May. I wonder what other events are we having?
So we are in the process of lining things up. We're spreading the word. The idea is we're going to have a soft gallery opening on Thursday of that weekend, and that's going to be more towards people who are coming to the festival that would like to attend, people who have helped produce the cookie cutter. The gallery show will be called The Art of Mo Stop-Mo, which is going to not only show my work as an artist and a sculptor, but then there's the section of Mo Stop-Mo, which is going to showcase the art of the film. So there'll be a soft opening on Thursday. Friday, we are trying to line up some speaking events. That's in the works right now. every first Friday in Oakland, they do a thing called Art Murmur, where they shut down Telegraph, and there's vendors and there's artists and performers, and the galleries are open. So that's going to be our official opening to the fest, and it's also going to be an opening to our gallery. So that's where we're going to welcome people in. Saturday, we're lining up speakers. I'm very excited to have one of my really good friends, Mike Owens, and his wife, Wendy, from Womo Studios. They're not only jurors for the festival, but Mike and Wendy have been working on animations for years. Animaniacs is one of their bigger titles. Mike had a series on Amazon called Danger and Eggs, in which he won an Emmy. We're working on a project right now called Monkey and Car, which we just were in Guadalajara this year earlier, Mike and Wendy and myself, kind of putting that educational system alongside a formal educational system to kind of teach more about stop motion or the art of mixed media animation. So Mike is going to do a speaking engagement during that day. We're going to be talking about safety in stop motion. I know there's a lot of people who are using chemicals, and they are in facilities, especially with the advent of a lot of printing techniques. We want to make sure that we're doing this art, but we're staying safe. There's going to be a speaking engagement about short form storytelling. There's going to be a part that I think is really helpful. I'm going to get some people that are pretty respected in the community about how did they first get started in animation or stop motion, because where you might have started, if you're somebody right now is like, oh my gosh, I'm just working as a bartender, or I'm just waiting tables, or I'm an Uber driver, or I'm delivering pizza, like how do I become a filmmaker? And everyone started somewhere, so we're going to have a speaking engagement about that. It's going to culminate with our screening, a 2-hour screening at the new Parkway Theater on that Saturday night at 7 p.m. It's a catered event, and depending on the ticket price you purchase, you get some little snacks along with that. And then we're going to have an after party, and that's still to be determined where that's going to be. We're going to still settle that down. There's a lot more details and sponsors and things that are going to happen that we're still working out the final details, so I don't want to say just yet. Even our jurors, we're working all that out, but come and tune into future podcasts and you'll have that information. But if you want to learn anything more about the festival, we are proud to list our festival on Film Freeway. So if you go to Film Freeway and look up Mo Stop Mo, it should be the first thing that you come up with. If you go to Film Freeway or even just type in stop motion, which should be one of the first 3 entries that you find. Enter your film if you've created a stop motion short in the past 2 years. So that's from 2018 to 2020. And either way, that gives you a ticket to the fest. And that means you're eligible to come to all the screening events and the speaking events and the party, and get a chance to build this community that I feel like we have a good momentum so far.
Yeah. We will keep updating the news. Thanks to our composer who also do the sound design for the Cookie Cutter short. Mm-hmm. As you hear, the intro music is also made by him.
Yeah, thanks for Brandon.
Thanks, Brandon. Yeah, so we will just list more links below the description of our podcast. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, and just remember, #MoStopMo.
Mo Stop Mo.
Woo!